Hello, my name is Dawn Sanchez, and here is my revised movie analysis. I stuck with the same movie because I think it has a lot of details that you can get out of this, and I definitely can use the Erickson's model. So I watched The Miracle Worker, and the movie depicts multi-learning approaches, including behavioralism from the theory of B.F. Skinner. The Miracle Worker is a 1962 biographical film based on a true story of Helen Keller and her teacher, Anne Sullivan. Blind to death after suffering a terrible fever as a baby. So she wasn't always blind and she wasn't always deaf, but that fever took her sight as well as her hearing away. And I just love this. It was played by young Helen Keller was played by Patty Duke. And she had just numerous of years of not being able to communicate, leaving her frustrated and occasionally violent as the last chance before her dad, and we're going to get into characters. Her dad, they wanted to institutionalize her because of her deaf and blindness. So let's get into the characters. So the characters were the young Kate, that was the wife or the mother, Helen Keller. Captain, which was the dad, husband of young Kate. Helen Keller herself. And I'm going to get into the ages. And then young James, which is the son or the brother of Helen Keller. When I break down the different lenses and the developments of this theory lens, I use B.F. Skinner because B.F. Skinner, of course, he believed in that that hardcore, everything has a consequence, right, for it. And the young Anne Sullivan absolutely used this. She was very harsh. She was a student, although she knew what could work, but she was very harsh and hard. So I'll get more into that, but that was definitely the lens I could see this character using, the B.F. Skinner, and I'll get more into that. Let's look into the characters. So like I said, young Kate, Captain, the husband, Helen Keller, and the brother. Okay, let's take a look at the wife, Kate. Kate, I will put her as if I'm looking at Erickson's model. She was between early adulthood. I believe she was probably in her early 20s, maybe 2024. She looked very young, very vibrant, very perky. She actually saw things of Helen Keller, her daughter, and she was more optimistic. She was more rambunctious. She was in terms of neurological and things of that nature. She was more open-minded, right? In terms of her physical appearance, like I said, more youthful, more bouncy, more just kind of like, hey honey, get up and go, and that kind of thing. So that was the wife. Now let's get into Captain. Captain, on the other hand, I'm going to put him at middle age. The reason why I say that, when I look at his features and things of that nature, he was salt and pepper from head to beard, and I would probably put him in probably his late 30s, maybe even his 40s, maybe, just because of the time frame. When you talk about 1962 and the time frame that even Helen Keller grew up in, men tend to marry younger wives in order to have more children. And so he was very established. You could tell he was very well established, even rich on many levels, because he had the big house, and he did have slaves that took care of his house, groomed the yard, he had a tobacco company, and he was actually kind of grooming his son James. Let's get into that. And so when I think about, like the type of neurological and physical and biological, the features, like I said, salt and pepper hair, more established. His mind was more business-fied. Yes, he believed in family, but he was more business-oriented than young Kate. Not that Kate didn't mind being her husband being a businessman, but she was clearly in that early adulthood where she loved being home, loved being a mother, loved being, taking care of different things. So you can see the two difference in the ages between the two. Young James, I'm going to put him in between of the adolescent years. He must have been like maybe 16, maybe 17. You can tell he was still, kind of going to school. He was still under the roof of his parents and stuff, but he was learning the family business from the dad. And in this movie, you could really tell that he was trying to make his dad proud of him. You could see him kind of trying to get his attention and trying to be like him, actually kind of arrogant like him. And I found it that he was just trying to be more like his dad. I saw there was a part in the scene where he was kind of trying to smoke a small cigar like his father, but it just didn't pan out like that. So I'm going to put him in that age bracket just because of mentally. Yes, he was young. He was younger than the wife, of course. And in his adolescence came out in him when he picked and pried about his sister being deaf and blind, and would kind of make jokes, kind of like Captain would. And so he was trying to connect with his father, even though it was very hurtful and sometimes very disrespectful to the mother and Helen Keller. So that kind of gives you a depiction of the different ages we got going on here. And then of course you have the maids and the help that was around there that ranged from, I'm gonna say, school age, the young girls and men to the maid, or the maid that was in the house that was a cook, which I would probably put her. It's kind of hard to kind of pinpoint her age, but I'm even gonna put her maybe even middle age, because she looks like like a big mama, what I would call a big mama to me. So she probably was in her, like, I don't know, that time frame, maybe late 40s, early 50s, something like that. Okay, so those are the characters, and those are the biological, neurological, and physicality of these characters. Okay, and when you look at young Helen Keller, I'm gonna put Helen Keller's age at about maybe at that time play age, 3 to 6. She's definitely not school age. She's not school age. She's not, because she's not independent enough. She's not, and that has to do with her limitations, of course. But she is definitely in that play age, maybe getting into that school age. But because of her limitations, it has kicked her back to her age in terms of the neurological part of her, the physicality of her. Although she looks very much her age, but the physicality of her, she was like a normal kid, right? She threw temper tantrums when she didn't get her way, and all of these crazy antics in order to get attention, because at this point these parents have no idea what to do with this child that is now blind and deaf. Okay, so we're there. So we have got down to the development stage of the characters, what led me to believe so. And like I said, the gray hair, the young, the youthful, vibrant way of young Kate, the way she thinks about her daughter and thinks about the situation, more optimistic. Captain is he's very business minded. It's one way, his way, no way, right? And the son that is trying to get the attention of both parents because they are attentive to Helen Keller. And of course, young Helen Keller, who has a limitation of being blind and deaf. So we got that out of the way. So now we're going to get into the developmental theories behind Helen Keller and her experiences and what I observed in this whole thing, in this lens. And so when I look into this whole situation is because she had so many limitations and stuff, and at this point, so from ages 0 to let's put her between 0 to 7, no, even young. Let's put her from 0 to play age. They have catered to her in a very unhealthy way. So B.F. Skinner says, "Hey, guess what? There has to be a reaction to everything that she is doing incorrectly, right? So he does this whole B.F. Skinner. His concept is, of course, about reinforcement and punishment, right? And the miracle worker in this movie. So here we're gonna let's come with the teacher now, Anne Sullivan, which is her mentor now. She comes into play, okay? So I'm going to put Anne Sullivan's age around, I'm going to say she is around early adulthood, maybe middle aged, maybe. I'm going to say she's about 29, 28, okay? Because she has her own limitations. She is half blind, okay? And so the dad, Captain, is not impressed because he's like, well, how is the blind going to lead the blind? That was the way he looked at it. She wore very dark glasses to keep the sun out because the sun and light messed with her eyes and stuff. But she really took the B.F. Skinner type of development theory into play when she is dealing with young Helen Keller, okay? So she has these techniques. She believes in reinforcement and she does believe in punishment, okay? So now she has the steps. So you're talking about collecting the data. So what she did was she went around, she looked at everything that Helen Keller was doing, how the house was dealing with her and her issues and her situation. She identified she took notes and identified everything and classified the data, analyzed it, and finally she went and said, okay, let me just tell you what I think about what's going on here. This is what's going on here. You have totally set her up, right? So every time she did something, there was one part in the movie where she was being just absolutely just belligerent, and she was like hitting and kicking. Her mother came in and she stabbed Helen Keller with a pen that she was writing with. And so the mom, to calm her down, gave her a piece of candy, which mom always did that. When Helen Keller wanted her way, she had candy in her pocket, and that's what she would get to calm her down. The funny thing is, in the beginning of the movie, when she was acting up and she was kicking and scratching and stuff, I recognized that's how she got her way. When she was out there tormenting the help and stuff like that, and they thought she was being violent. They thought she was being wild. But what she was asking for was the candy. So her mother would come out there and give her a candy, and guess what? It would calm her down. And Anne Sullivan said, no, that is not what we're going to do. Why are you rewarding her with her bad behavior, which B.F. Skinner talked about? So she went on and she said, you know what? Let me have her. You don't be in it. Don't even be a part of this right now, which I thought was really interesting. But I understood it. She wanted to teach young Helen Keller the positive things first before she interacted with the parents and shared what to do and how to develop the things that she was teaching her. Okay, so it was tough love. It really was. The positive reinforcement, when she would spell the word doll, DOLL, and she would take her hand and she would have her to feel it in her hand. And when she showed her a doll, and she was kicking and screaming, she said, no, you won't get it until you spell it. And she kept saying it in her hand. So finally Helen Keller went. So she gave her the doll. She says, good girl. She gave her the doll. So her positive reinforcement, she gave her what she wanted. When she had the negative come out, Helen Keller, what she did was she didn't give her any reinforcement. She said, no, you will not get the candy. You will not get the doll. You will not go out and play. No, you won't slap. You won't bite. No, there will be no rewards for your bad behavior. And then after a while, it got to the point where she started to learn that the only way that she could do this if Anne Sullivan was getting what she wanted. When she brought her back to the house, back to the farmhouse with her family and all of these things, And she sat down at the table because she had taught her all of these skills. And Captain only gave her 2 weeks. And she said, it's not enough time. It is not enough time. He said, well, that's the only time you'll get. Because he was totally not even believing that a woman that's half blind could teach his daughter that is blind something that she needed. There was no way she could teach her. I mean, he was so, when I say he was so business-fied, he was business-fied. And he even said, how like you can't teach a baby. Like, this is what he was saying, you can't teach a baby. Like, it's like teaching a baby. And she said, that's not true. Well, how does a baby learn to talk? How does a baby learn to walk? And he kind of looked at her. He said, by you teaching them. He said, Helen is smart. She is so smart. And when we bring her back to the house, she's going to test you. And I don't want you to unravel everything that I have done. So when he came back to the house, of course, young Helen Keller actually did test them all. She tested them all. She was sitting at the table. The mom had fixed all the foods. The son was sitting down. Everybody was sitting down. The aunt, I'll tell you about the aunt. The aunt that came in, she is definitely she's not even middle age. She is in the old age bracket. She's very old school. And her thing was, you know what, this is the first time. And she was kind of neutral in a way. She believed that Helen was smart. She believed that she just needed, someone to guide her. And so she was all for her niece to get the young Anne Sullivan to come and mentor her and help her through these things. They were sitting down at the table, and I did mention the aunt because she only had little small parts and scenes, but she was very quiet when it came to family discussions, even though she was the older person in the house, in the group, and only visited it now and then. So she was in the first part of the segment, and she was now at the part of the house where young Helen Keller was coming back, because they didn't allow a lot of people to come to their house because Helen Keller was out of control. They got there, she could at that point eat with a fork, she can put her own napkin in her lap, but this time she didn't. She was going around the room trying to pick up the food, eating it with her hands, and Anne Sullivan came and snatched and put her down, and the father said, is that necessary? And she said, yes, it is. If you don't allow her to do these things, he said, and if you don't continue to do what I'm doing, she will disengage everything that I have taught her, and she will be useless in the world. She has a voice. She has a voice. Let her be able to use it. They went through this whole fight, and the son stepped in, now not wanting dad's approval, and said, let Anne deal with Helen. It was a different turn from the beginning to that point. Different turn. And using that, and just all of a sudden, everybody, it was so funny because they were all divided. Nobody was together, and everything started to click. The husband no longer ran off to work, because that's what he did with young Helen Keller would have these issues. He would run off to work. He would deal with the work. But this time, he just stepped outside. The son stood up to the dad, and so did the wife. And at that point, he said, she looked at the mentor and said, do what you must. And she did. And she sat Helen Keller down, and she walked out, and he went out the house, and she had threw a pitcher of water. She said, well, what are you taking her? She said, she's going to fill this pitcher up with water again. They went out, and they started using the pump to get the water out. And something clicked. And she began to spell water in her hand. And she's like, yes. And then she went a little bit further, and she could spell, I know a little sign language, that's why I'm able to do that. She spelled flower with her hand. and she is connecting. And she said she knows it. She knows it. And everybody's running outside, and everybody's like, what's happening? What's going on? And they're running outside, and she grabbed Anne Sullivan's hand, and she was like, like petting her mom. And she said, what is that? And she put mother or mom. And she spelled mom, and she went to her and hugged her, and she grabbed Captain's hand, and she was like, Papa. And she connected it. She had it in her all the time. So when we look at the B.F. Skinner model, some people would be like, man, that was really, really harsh. I mean, she didn't take no mess. I mean, if the young girl kind of, hit her, she hit her back. And I mean, everybody, we all have that, there's pros and cons to everything that we do, right? But when it came down to the development theory with Helen Keller, it had to be, I think, a little bit more forceful, because she had so many bad habits that she had already learned, and now Anne Sullivan, the mentor, had to unlearn them. And so when I look through that lens, when I look through that movie, B.F. Skinner was the developmental theory lens that I could see in this situation, because she definitely saw the not positive, and learned about and dealt with her in reinforcing her when she did something correct, and also having a reaction when she wasn't doing something or doing something incorrect. So that was the one that I chose, was the B.F. Skinner one. And it says, what factors should a counselor be aware of when working with characters during this development stage? And when I'm looking at young Helen Keller, the one thing that I think a counselor should be aware of is knowing which theory or development theory you should use with what particular client, what will work. Maybe B.F. Skinner won't work for somebody else. Maybe, other theories wouldn't work with Helen Keller. They had tried everything. They had did everything, and they were getting ready to institutionalize her, thinking that she was unable to learn, and that she was like unable to even understand words, let alone anything else. So I think as a counselor or a mentor or an organization leadership, I think when we have people that come into our office or sit on our couches or whatever, I think we should really be aware of all the theories that we've learned in our school, in our higher learning, all the theories that we have went over. I think it's important that we are aware of what theory or what goes with what. It's kind of like playing a puzzle piece, or match this picture with that. And it's not a one size fit all for mentors or anybody. I think we all need to be aware that everybody's in a different development stage, and also with counselors or mentors or whatever, when we're dealing with parents or we're dealing with co-workers or someone or such that may have caregivers that are involved in their lives, to not let them go away thinking that there is nothing that can be done, because it's something that's always can be done, and they can always have a hand in it. In the end of it, Anne Sullivan taught the mother how to sign and how to talk to her daughter, and of course at the end, Captain got on board and also learned how to talk to his daughter, and and although it was what they call sign language, they had to learn how to communicate, because what good was it to have Helen Keller to get all of these skills, and if the people that she's around every day could not talk to her, so it would develop her vocabulary. Helen Keller went on, as a matter of fact, when I look her up, it's so cool. I just gotta do this. She became to be American author. I know this is a long video, but I just love her. Helen Keller became an American author. She did lectures, and she became like advocate for not just disabilities in education, political advocates, and a lecturer. So she went on to do great things, being deaf and blind. And I really followed her a lot in this. When I found out I was dyslexic, actually, she was one of the people that I looked up and said, I remember typing up something like people born with disabilities, and she popped up. Although I'm not blind and I'm not deaf, but I do understand that people like myself and her, we have a different language. I do understand, I do know that. And the older I get, the more my language is different, and how I even say things are different. So that is my lens and my movie analysis. I hope you enjoy me just sitting back and talking about it. I hope there was something that I said. I hope I hit all my points. I think I did. But that is my movie analysis on The Miracle Worker. If you haven't seen it, I think you should check it out. And it was a good movie, and I enjoyed watching it again, although I have watched it over maybe 100 times already. Thank you. Bye.